Hey church family, I hope you are doing well in quarantine. We miss you here at church. We can't wait to reunite with you guys. But in the meantime, this is such a blessing that we have this virtual connection. I wanted to share a little something that God is teaching me through this quarantine, and I wanted to share it with you guys. I had this question pop up. What if we treated our relationship with God with the same attitude that many treated the entire quarantine, the start of quarantine? What do I mean by that? Well, at the beginning of quarantine, so many people had a fear of missing out. They feared that they were missing out on getting all of the toilet paper and all of the hand sanitizer, and they feared that they were missing out on something of taking the last trip to the store because they didn't know how long everything was going to last. And so they had this fear, and I thought about it and I was like, well, what if we treated our relationship with God the same way? What if we had a fear of missing out, a fear of missing out on what God wants to teach us, a fear of missing out what God wants to say to us during different seasons in our lives, including this quarantine time? So what if the same way that we were running to the stores, the same way that we were running to buy things, if we would run to the presence of God to hear His voice, to hear what He wants to teach us? And in Isaiah 6:8, it says, "Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying," this is Isaiah speaking, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, here I am, send me." So Isaiah is responding, he's saying, here I am, send me. And so often we want to be sent by God. We want to be used by God, which is so good and so awesome to have that desire to be used by God. And sometimes we ask God, we're like, God, give me a platform, I'll speak. Give me a small group and I'll lead it. And we want to be used by God, which is awesome. But before saying, here I am, send me, prior to that, it says, then I heard the voice of the Lord saying. So before being able to respond, you have to hear the voice of God. So we want to run to the presence of God so we can hear what God wants to say so that we can respond to it. So we actually have to spend time with Him in the secret place so that we can actually respond to what He's calling us to do. Whether it's to preach on a stage, whether it's to lead a small group, whatever that is, whatever God is calling you for. And in Matthew 4:19-20, the coolest thing is I think that the disciples had a little bit of fear of missing out too. So Jesus said, "Come follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." At once, they left their nets and followed Him. I think that the disciples also felt a little bit of fear of missing out. When Jesus called out to them, he said, "Follow me." And they just dropped everything in that moment. At once, it says, at once they left their nets and followed Him. They wanted to not miss out on what God is doing. And I don't want us to miss out on what God is doing in our lives, especially here in quarantine. I want us to seek after what He's teaching us, to be in tune with what He wants us to learn coming out of this. And I can't even imagine what a crowd of believers would look like if we were all on the same page with that, if we were all living in that fear of missing out and not wanting to miss out on what God is teaching us. And if people could see us being that light and running towards His presence, they're going to look at us the way that people were looking at other people buying toilet paper. They're going to go and want to do it too, just because we're going to have a different kind of attitude. We're going to be setting an example of what it looks like to be following God and just running to Him because we don't want to miss out on what He's doing. And when non-believers can see that, if they can see that kind of light in us and say, I want what they have. I want to have a fear of missing out on whoever this God is that they serve because they have something I don't have. In quarantine, the case was toilet paper, but in this case, we can be carrying joy. We can be carrying love and kindness towards people because of the time that we spend in the presence of God. So I just want to challenge you guys in this quarantine. We don't know how much longer we have left, but in the remaining time, spend some time in His presence so that when you come out of here, we can have a story to tell of what God was teaching us. And this is what He's teaching me is to come back and have a fear of missing out and not want to miss out on what He's teaching me. I don't want to skip this season and just walk out of it barely surviving and just crawling out of quarantine. I want to know that God was teaching me something, and I hope that you do too. I hope this blesses you. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the other side.